Welcome back to Rich Dad StockCast. I'm your host, Denney, and today we're talking about one of the most important and overlooked keys to building wealth, financial literacy. Most people were never taught how money actually works. They were taught how to earn it, but not how to keep it, how to grow it, or use it to buy freedom. And today we're going to fix just that. Joining me today is Rich Dad expert Andy Tanner, and we're breaking down what financial literacy really is, why most people don't have it, and how you can start developing it right now. And before we get into it, make sure you visit stockcastbonus.com to grab your free investing tools. If you want to take control of your money, that's where you start. All right, Andy, let's dive in. Welcome.
Thanks much. I was glad to hear you plug that stockcastbonus.com because that fits perfect with what we're going to do today. When people
Indeed it does. And before we jump in, maybe you can tell us what's in stockcastbonus.com.
Well, it's really, a lot of people, they'll do a lot of podcasts or they'll watch YouTube videos, they read books on wealth building, but they have a hard time with the, just cold hard next steps. And what I often call a blueprint. People might know what a house is and what a hammer is and what a saw is and what lumber is and what, electrical wire is, but putting it all together can be tough. And so go to stockcastbonus.com and just see for yourself, it's free, if that isn't just a fabulous blueprint for the person to take a first step, make a quantum leap into action. There's a wonderful quote that says, an intellectual assent to a truth is not the same as applying it. And a lot of people really are getting good now at listening and paying attention, but they do struggle with actually applying. A person might, if I were to say, well, how much, content did you consume in the last 2 weeks on financial education? People might say quite a bit. But if I say, how many assets did you actually buy in the last 2 weeks? People might say, well, not as many. And so that bridge between what we know and what we're learning and our actual behavior is a very important bridge to cross. And that's really why we do stockcastbonus.com. Go there, check that out. And make sure you start taking action, because that's when things actually begin to happen in our lives.
There we go. I love taking action. That's the key, I think, to success, is that taking action part. Well, let's start with the basics here. We hear about the phrase financial literacy a lot, but what does that actually mean in practice?
Well, as you say in the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, there's a phrase or question really that says, why teach, financial literacy? And I would say the first answer to that question might be that it's not well taught in school. School is a lot like, speaking of schools, fish travel in schools. And unfortunately, many of our fish today in the world are born in hatcheries. And a hatchery is a protective prison. It's a place where they're nurtured, they're kept in a little box, and the whole time they're being developed to serve the angler's agenda, not their own. And when they're released in the wild, they might feel a little bit of freedom, much like, my son is graduating from high school in the next, couple weeks or so. And they might feel a lot of freedom, but really most of them are going off to college to continue that development to prepare them for the workforce. And that's really the paradigm, the blueprint, the map, the pathway, the dogma. Go to school and get good grades and get a job, and then go work. And there's nothing wrong with hard work and nothing wrong with having a vocation. But the second 40 years of our life is designed to be not working, right? It's called retirement. And most people won't make it to the degree they want to or live the life that they want to. And that's because they haven't been investing along the way. They haven't been, compounding effectively. And many people want to exit the rat race earlier. There's no rule that says you have to wait till 65. So these are all, I think, great answers to the question of, well, why teach financial literacy? It's money is something that affects every one of us. Assets, whether you're a consumer or producer, that's a choice that every single person will make. So there's a lot of reasons to teach financial literacy.
Very good. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions is that if someone makes good income, they have a good paying job, they're financially smart. But that's not always true. Is that right?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's something you love to do. Robert has his second book was the Cashflow Quadrant, and I love that book because I remember Robert, telling me, you don't really have a right hand and a wrong hand. You have a right hand and a left hand. For example, LeBron James works for the Los Angeles Lakers. He seems to do well at that job. He seems to really love that job, and he's really stayed in it longer than most people that are in his profession do, and he's worked really hard to stay there. I think he likes his life. I think he likes what he does. So, a person that has a great job in the E quadrant, that gets paid well, that loves what he does, nothing wrong with that at all. The S quadrant is people that are self-employed. I think of all the artists. I really like Lady Gaga. I think she's an incredible musician. She has her antics, but her musicianship is just phenomenal, and her respect for that art is unsurpassed. She's self-employed, and she does okay. She seems to, really enjoy what she does. I think the problem with E quadrant and S quadrant is when people don't enjoy what they do,
Mm,
and our life is made up of time. And so if we're spending time doing what we like and we're earning money, I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that's pretty smart. But I also think there's some people that went for a good job, and these might be the group you're referring to, that said, "Well, my parents told me to go, be this or that, and so I did, and I hate it. I absolutely can't stand it." And I have lots of friends in that realm where they actually make pretty good money, but they really, they really hate it, and that type of thing. So it's really about your time and how you spend your time. And what investing has the potential to do is to free up time. Another reason why I teach financial education.
there we go. Now, what about I, there's something that a lot of people confuse, and that's the difference between an asset and a liability. Why is understanding that distinction so, I want to say important, so critical?
Yeah. Robert Kiyosaki got himself a lot of fire. People taking shots at him when he said, "Your residence, the house you live in, is not an asset, whereas a house that other people live in and pay rent for would be an asset." And his definition is very, very simple. It's certainly not the accountant's definition in the accounting world, but he basically says, "Look, if I own something that produces cash and puts money in my pocket, it is an asset. And if I own something that takes money out of my pocket and costs me a lot of money to net to own, that's going to be a liability." And so, a lot of people would say, "Well, I'm going to liquidate all my assets. I'm going into bankruptcy, so I'm going to liquidate my cars and liquidate my house." Well, in that sense, I guess they say, you're going to assets would be something you could liquidate and turn into cash. But from a financial education standpoint, that can be confusing. And I think the way Robert does it, which is the way I taught my kids, is he removes the numbers from his pictures, and he uses arrows to show where cash moves, where the amount of cash is less relevant in learning cash flow than the flow of the cash. We call it currency. It moves like a current. So yeah, I think it is confusing for people to know an asset and liability. Del, it's interesting. The cash flow game we talked about in a previous episode, and I used to conduct those all the time when I would do a lot of public speaking workshops years and years ago when I used to travel more. And on Saturday, we'd spend the first couple of days, teaching, and the best thing to do is simulate the real experience. So we did this with the cash flow game. And there were a lot of degree holders, I'll just say, people that had degrees, and they, those guys would, how would you say it? Kind of poo poo that experience. They'd say, "Oh, what are we going to play a board game for?" But we had engineers and doctors and lawyers, that group of people with advanced degrees, PhDs. They couldn't play it, and they were losing the game to people who were much less educated academically than they were. So knowing how an asset works and knowing how to read some numbers later on, and knowing how cash flows, it really begins, I think, the way I taught my kids is the way Robert taught me, is with a financial statement. And when you can read a financial statement, you get to see how the assets and liabilities separate pretty quickly, which assets produce cash flow, and which the accountants might call an asset, but it's really not income producing.
Mm. Now, speaking of academic education and just education in general, why don't you think that financial literacy is taught at schools? Like, what's the long-term cost of that?
I don't know the answer to that question fully, Dell. I don't know. I mean, some people think, it's pretty easy to go to conspiracy, say, well, they're trying to keep everyone poor, or they're trying to create workers. I use that analogy, the fish hatchery, and maybe that's hyperbole. I really don't know why it is. And it could be that, it's just not known to be taught. The other thing that I think is where it's hard to teach it in school is school teaches, things like numbers, but there's a spirit to investorship and entrepreneurship. There's a spirit of, it's much more than just an academic experience. I think that if you were to study Warren Buffett, if a person studies his life, and Munger as well, I think they'd find the same thing I found, is that it wasn't that they had just knowledge of numbers and financial statements, but they also had a personal development in temperament and a personal development in discipline. In other words, they had habits that were wealth building habits, and they had a temperament where they could bounce back or stomach what we call the vicissitudes. So it is, when you think about people, why they don't invest, it might be half because they're uneducated. But I've found that even when people get educated, there's a component of pulling the trigger, a component of risk, a component. And so when people, feel they can be dependent on their parents for income, then that's a nice, safe, secure feeling that mommy and daddy will take care of me. All a job does is replace that feeling, right? Here's something I do what I'm supposed to do, so maybe my parents give me allowance. Okay, I do what I'm supposed to do, so my boss gives me a paycheck. And so there's a sense, and if I lose that job, I go find another one, right? So there's this sense of immediate security, and it's fairly consistent when you're employed. If you have an advanced degree, you're often more employable. And it just seems like a safe place to live, even though it's not a pleasant place to be beholden to your parents and be under their rules, or to be beholden to the job and under their rules. So that freedom has a cost to it that is emotional. It has a personal development and a resilience that a person undergoes, because business will test you and investing will test you. It's not always a smooth ride. If you were to look at Warren Buffett's returns, there's times where he's lost half his money in a year. And Buffett and Munger both said, if you can't stomach a 50% loss, you shouldn't be in stocks, in a year. So it's, why isn't it taught in school? I don't know, but I do know that it's not. And maybe that's the more important landing space, is just say, look, why it isn't taught, who knows, but we know that it isn't.
Yeah, very, very true. Well, let's do this. Let's go to break real quick. We've just laid the groundwork for what financial literacy is, but when we come back, Andy's going to walk us through how to actually build it, how to apply it, how to use it to make smarter decisions in your everyday life. And if you want to start making moves right now, head over to stockcastbonus.com. You'll find free tools and education to help you become more confident, more capable investor. Stick around. We'll be right back.
So far, it's been great. I needed a source where I could really enrich my education through stocks. I didn't really have an avenue for it, and it's helped me a lot. The simplicity has really gotten me on the track to where I enjoy the learning, as well as it's really solidifying in my mind. And they're not just trying to sell you something, they really care about the people that are in the course, and they really do care about you and your personal goals, and what you want to do is to help you and your family and whatever your goals are in life through that. So it's really been great.
All right, Andy, let's get practical. What are some of the core skills someone needs to develop if they want to improve their financial literacy? I think you've mentioned a little bit about temperament, but what else can we do to improve our financial literacy?
Well, if you look at it from a personal development standpoint, it begins with education, knowing what to do. Now, whether you can, there's a couple of battles we fight in our life, at least the two. I've been in personal development a long time because I've been trying to develop myself personally, right? And there's just really two battles you fight. First is the ignorance battle. The gap, there's a gap that exists between what I know and what I really need to know to perform well in as an investor, right? There's just certain stuff that you absolutely would know and have to know, and there's a cutting edge of the word required there, and that's just how it is, right? So someone's either excited about that and sees that as an exciting illumination, or they see that as drudgery and having to work, and they fade away. So that's the first gap. The second gap is, as we mentioned in the previous segment, there's a gap often, is the more frustrating of the two for me, between what I know and my behavior, my habits. I went to college and I took a class on exercise physiology. So obviously I know how that stuff works on a cellular level. In fact, I know how it works on on an atomic level. And so I have that knowledge, but getting on that treadmill or going out and taking the time to go for a run or whatever, my habits don't always find congruence with what I know. So the same is true with financial education, right? I just have to do a little better with that one because it burns less calories, I guess. So we look at ourselves in any area of life and we say, hey, does my behavior match my knowledge? So the first step, if that's what you're asking, is knowledge. We certainly can't, we're not going to do well messing around with things that we know nothing or little about, or even partial knowledge is sometimes almost more dangerous than no knowledge at all. They call this knowing enough to be dangerous. And this is very, very important in the misinformation age, because that's the age that we're in. We're not in the information age. We're in the misinformation age. And we're in the fake information age. And a lot of what we see is synthetic and not genuine. And that's one of the fears of AI, is not that it will teach us properly, that it will teach us improperly. And so it's a big time right now to really understand who your mentors are and who your teachers are. And, education's a really, really important space right now.
Indeed. What a gem that is, that last nugget there. I love that. We really have to choose our mentors wisely right now. Now, speaking of mentors, choose wisely. Now, Robert Kiyosaki, I've learned so much from him, and he always talks about understanding your personal financial statement. Why is that so important?
Well, you mentioned early we have this is a great opportunity to plug something free at stockcastbonus.com. When a person reads Rich Dad Poor Dad, I hope that one of the big epiphanies they get is the importance of that personal financial statement. It's what the cash flow game is all about, is understanding a personal financial statement. And really there's three parts to any financial statement. There's your income statement. It talks about money coming in, money going out, income and expenses. There's a balance sheet that talks about the things that you own and the things that you owe other people. And then the third one is a little bit lesser known. It's called the statement of cash flow. It just talks about the source from which cash is flowing in or out, whether it be from investment, whether it be from borrowing, or whether it be from work that we do. We call it operational cash flow. So those three statements together make up the financial statement. Everybody has one. There's a personal one for a household, corporate financial statements, sovereign financial statements, government financial statements. Nonprofits have them, churches have them, schools have them. Any organization requires cash to survive has one, which is all of them. And so understanding that gives us the glasses and the lighting to see how something's likely to affect us and what type of risks are there and how they might likely affect us. So having an understanding of that allows us to have glasses, so to speak, to look at an opportunity and decide, better decide with our eyes more wide open on whether to take it. There's a saying that Kenny McElroy or Kim Kiyosaki, one of those two, came up with it, that said the bigger the brochure, the worse the deal. Because really, all you'd really have to show is good financial cash flow, good financial statement, and most investors could tell. But if it's not good, they'll cover it with a bunch of flowers and put lipstick on the pig, so to speak, with a big brochure. So it's very important. The power of six is something I call the six numbers in the first two parts of the financial statement: income, expenses, net income, or what we often call cash flow, net cash flow, or you have assets, liabilities, and net worth. So there's six numbers there. And if a person develops a habit of a weekly timeout where they take time each week to just review that and build one for today, just accurate where you are today, and then build one for the future. I actually have calculators that I can give people, in that program, where we can really build what your financial statement would look like in a dream life, down to the penny. And you compare where you are now and where you are then, and you just see which numbers need to be focused on in what order, and you start working on those numbers. And it's very structured and very step by step. And it's a great way to begin is take an audit and an inventory of where you are today, fill out your own financial statement a day, focus on it once a week, and build one for the future of what you'd like it to look like, and then start bridging the two. And it's a very practical how-to step-by-step idea that just takes focus. What we focus on expands. What's out of sight is out of mind, but what we focus on is going to expand in our lives. And so by focusing on your financial statement will likely expand, not contract.
That's good. It makes me think of the talk of ignorance that we spoke of earlier. And I think there's a phrase, you don't know what you don't know until you know that you don't know. So how enlightening those calculators are to figure out what are the numbers I need to work on. Now, let's tie this back to investing. How does financial literacy help someone make better investing decisions, especially when the market is so volatile and certain, we have tariffs, we have news, we have all this stuff going on. How does financial literacy help someone make better investing decisions?
Well, I think I'll go to two billionaires on this one. Observations that I've taken from two billionaires. Billionaire number one would be Jeff Bezos or Bezos. I never know. I should learn which one it is. But Jeff Bezos, he said something that I think is really key if people perk up their ears and listen. He said that he often gets questions about the future and what he thinks will be the biggest changes he sees coming in the future. What's going to change? And he said, well, that's a great question. It's an interesting question, but maybe a more valuable question would be to look in the future and be able to see the things that won't change. So, when you talk about tariffs, well, that's a change, right? We're just having them change and maybe not change. And, there's certainly change there and that we worry about. And Warren Buffett calls these the vicissitudes of the market, right? These moving around and evolve of the market. But I'll tell you something that doesn't change: production and consumption. Human beings are consumers. We're going to consume energy, food. We need clothing, shelter. We need communication now. Add to that list, we need energy is now a need. Energy is not a luxury. We need some type of fuel to keep us warm and light, and communication now is a must. You can't have food without transportation anymore. People don't grow stuff in their gardens. So if you still need food, you still need railroads and trucks, and therefore you need fuel and energy, and therefore you need communication. What's going there? So the technology now is a need, and so those are constants now. Well, a tariff might change, but I still got to eat lunch. That doesn't change. So what investors really are producers. They put themselves on the production side where they really hold the cards. If you put me on a desert island and you have all the Bitcoin in the world and I have all the coconuts and food in the world, I have the power. you have nothing. And so whether you want to use dollars or yen, feathers, bitcoins, whatever, beads, seashells, whatever you want to trade with, the person that produces the things we really need holds the cards. They have the position and posture. And so Warren Buffett understands this. And so so to your question, let's go to the second billionaire, which is Buffett. Why can Warren Buffett own See's Candies, which is a food company, Geico Insurance, which doesn't make any type of food, they sell insurance, Chevron and Occidental Petroleum, which is an energy company, American Express, which is a financial company, RC Willey, which is a furniture company, Duracell, which is a battery company, and on and on and on. Burlington Northern Santa Fe, which is a railroad, a transportation company. He hasn't specialized in anything. And yet, how can a person find success in Dairy Queen is so much different than, Chevron, right? They're just so different. How can he find success? Well, it comes from understanding generalized principles that are true in all cases, that are going to be true for every one of those businesses. He's going to understand a moat, which is going to be an important principle in all cases, a defense. He's going to understand financial statements, that there are certain fundamental numbers. That's a great word, that he's going to look at carefully. And if we have fundamental numbers that we're going to look at carefully, we can coin a term. The term's called fundamental analysis. It is the first pillar of investing, the first of four, risk management being the last of the four. But understanding that fundamental analysis is why we play the cash flow game, is we get a sense of how cash should flow, where money should come from, how expenses should be managed. And surprisingly, I've waited my whole life for, the Holy Grail, some epiphany of seeing the future, that I thought I'd be the oracle somewhere, but that never happened. And I don't think it will. I think it's just like basketball. You get solid fundamentals. You recognize a player that has just good fundamentals in their sport, and that doesn't change. Those fundamentals are not going to change. So when you say, how do we do this amongst all of this chaos and change? Well, yeah, there's chaos and change, but amongst all that chaos and change, there's actually core principles that are solid all the time, that never change. And understanding how to read a financial statement and understanding what those fundamentals are, they give a person, in my opinion, a great advantage. So, I can spout off on that for a long time, but two billionaires, what doesn't change? Generalized principles don't. And if you know what they are and how to read them, I think that gives us a chance to invest well.
That is so good. I love that concept, generalized principles, especially as things change. AI comes into the world. The future is uncertain, but focusing on those principles are huge. So incredibly valuable. Now, before we wrap up, what's one thing you challenge every listener to start doing this week that would improve their financial IQ?
Well, you threw that softball over the plate. Go to stockcastbonus.com. It's free. It takes away excuses. Ask yourself right now if you've been there or not. And if you haven't been there, the downside to going there is zero. We have free stuff. And so go download that and learn more about what we have to give you. Very, very simple to do. If you have gone there, ask yourself, hey, how has this worked for me? Yeah, this is cool. This is a plan I can do. This gives me actionable steps. I actually outline, I talked about having a weekly session, either with your spouse or just on your own, where I even show you the steps of what to outline, what the agenda of that meeting should look like, what boxes you should check. And lo and behold, it will move you forward. And you can say, I actually did something this week. I actually moved forward towards my goal. And it'll change your financial statements. So that's the one thing you can do, is act. Without action, nothing is produced. Without action, no one improves. Without action, it's all just watching a movie in my head. We want to turn dreams into reality, and action is the thing that turns a dream into reality. You have a blueprint, which is a dream, and you pick up the tools and you use your training, and you build that reality. A dream is no longer a dream once it has a price tag on it. Once it has a price tag on it, it's finite. It's an object I can work on. If a person has a goal, if you took every area of your life and you said, all right, food, clothing, shelter, let's start with food. What kind of food do I want? Well, do I want to have unlimited drive-through? Not me, but that might be someone's dream. Unlimited drive-through. I have enough money to go through the drive-through anytime I want and supersize, right? Others might be saying, well, I'd rather go to Whole Foods and I want to be able to afford really great stuff. Others say, I want a private chef. Others say, I want a live-in chef. Well, whatever you want, there's a price tag on any of those. And you can look it up and find it and say, all right, that's how much it costs. Now it's finite. And that is a life that you can begin to work towards. And surprisingly, you can make progress towards that. You can do things. Believe in yourself. That's a great, maybe that's a great start, is just believe that you can be better than you are today, and believe that, while it will take some steps, that those steps are walkable. And those stairs are stairs you can climb because they're just step by step. And maybe you feel like your staircase, goes as far as you can see. Well, okay, that's fine, but we know we can take the step in front of us, right? We know we can take that one and then the next one. Let's start walking. Let's start moving towards what you really, really want. And I think that, there'll be people that often just get tired of, content consumption. They want to move their body somewhere and change their circumstance. So that transition into action, I think, is a very important step, maybe the most important first step.
There we go. Fantastic. Well, that wraps up today's episode of Rich Dad StockCast. Here's the truth. If you don't understand how money works, it will always control you. But if you build your financial literacy, you take control, and that changes everything. And a big thank you to Andy Tanner for joining us. And if you're ready to take the next step, go to stockcastbonus.com and grab your free financial tools. It's time to stop guessing and start growing, start taking action, just like Andy said. And if this episode has helped you, be sure to like, subscribe, share it with someone who's ready to make smarter money moves. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Denney. Stay smart, stay invested, and take control of your financial future.
Thanks, Del.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.